Welcome in to Vol Basketball Fever, your number one source for discussions about the Vols and Lady Vols basketball programs. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a video, and check in every week for new episodes of the show, video breakdowns, and more. Now, on with the episode. Hello everyone, and welcome in to another episode of Vol Basketball Fever. I am Nathanael Rutherford, joined by Gene Henley here for another episode of the show. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this week's episode. Again, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're listening on your podcast app of choice, we really appreciate you guys tuning in week and week out when we have these episodes, whether it's a Vol Basketball Fever, Lady Vol Basketball Fever, a special interview with a player or coach or beat writer. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe and like this video. Liking the video and subscribing obviously helps out the channel grow and helps us reach more people. So really would appreciate that a ton. And of course, share it around. Share the podcast, the audio podcast, or share the YouTube channel around with your friends, family, anyone you know who's a Vol fan who might want to hear more about Vol basketball, because we talk about just Vol and Lady Vol basketball here on the show. It's not a show that also talks about, football, baseball, other stuff. We'll mention those sports, but this is a specifically for you basketball fans out there and Vols and Lady Vols fans as well. Gene, this episode's going to be a mailbag episode. Before we get to that, we do have a couple of topics I wanted to talk about before we get to it. But if you ask questions, I asked on Twitter for you guys to send your questions, and we got a few on there. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see your name, your tweet on the screen here. So I guess if you want to see your stuff on the screen, future incentive for when I call for questions in the future, send them questions. You'll get to be, featured on the show here. But I got a few of those. But before we dive into those questions, Gene, we didn't talk last week about the Big 12 SEC Challenge, and even since then, we've kind of got even more schedule news. Not any firm dates on these, but the SEC announced earlier this week, I believe on Tuesday. It might have been, it was Tuesday. Tennessee tweeted out the graphic today on Wednesday. We're recording this Wednesday night. But on Tuesday, the SEC announced not the schedule per se, but they announced the teams every SEC team will be playing. And for once, at least on paper, Gene, I think Tennessee has not a super difficult, it's always difficult when you're in the SEC in any major sport, but compared to some of the last few seasons for Tennessee under Rick Barnes, especially in SEC play, it's not as brutal of a schedule on paper. You of course have your home and home series with Kentucky, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, but you also will be playing home and home series against Auburn, which will be fun because two times the Bruce Pearl versus Tennessee is always going to be fun, and I wish those two teams had played home and homes last year, I guess this past season. But this upcoming season, we'll see Auburn as a home and home, Tennessee hosting Auburn, and they also going to Auburn to play them, and also Mississippi State, which I think will be better than last year. Maybe I do not remember who all they've added and lost. I will have to double check that. We'll know, we'll kind of have a better feel for the teams as the months go on, we get closer to the season. But Auburn and Mississippi State are the two other home and home teams that Tennessee will be playing this year, along with Kentucky, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. They're permanent rivals. The home slate of games this season in the SEC, Gene: Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Missouri, South Carolina, Vanderbilt. That's not a stellar home series, but you do get Arkansas and Alabama at home, which I imagine those two are going to be, especially Arkansas, with all the talent they have, they're going to be a preseason probably top 10 team, and Tennessee doesn't have to face them on the road, which, they lost last year to them on the road. So that's a plus. You only face them in Knoxville. On the road, of course, you also have Auburn, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and South Carolina, but you also go to Florida, to LSU, to Ole Miss, and to Texas A&M. All in all, Gene, it's not bad. You split. You have home and homes against two of the tougher opponents in Kentucky and Auburn. You only host Arkansas and Alabama. To me, your toughest road trips are going to be Florida. Besides Kentucky and Auburn, are going to be Florida and LSU. Then you also throw in the fact we know some of the other non-conference matchups and some of the early season tournaments that Tennessee is going to be in. But then you also throw in the fact that, like I just said, we didn't talk about last week. You have the Big 12 SEC Challenge that announced all of their matchups. Tennessee's playing Texas again, but this time they're hosting them. Of course, last time those two teams played each other in Knoxville was the very famous Chris Lofton over Kevin Durant three-pointer. Tennessee winning in overtime in that game, of course, beating Rick Barnes in Texas that time out. But Tennessee will be hosting Texas. So you get a lot of, I think finally for Tennessee, it's been a while since they've had that's a truly favorable schedule. And even this, I don't want to say it's the most favorable schedule you could draw up, but hey, this is not a bad schedule. This is a schedule that, with the kind of talent Tennessee has, as long as they don't sustain any injuries, again, this is on paper, this is late June, early July when we're talking about this stuff. A lot can change between now and November, December, when the season really starts getting underway. But Gene, I kind of like that schedule with your toughest road matchups being Kentucky, Auburn, Florida, LSU, and two of those teams, Kentucky and Auburn, you have the home and home split. And then again, you're hosting Texas, you're hosting Alabama, hosting Arkansas. I don't think it's a bad schedule. I think this is a type of schedule that can shape up to get Tennessee into that top 4 of the SEC, which is exactly what you want to be doing year in and year out, because that gives you the double bye in the tournament. And if you're in the top 4 in the SEC, you're more than likely going to be, one of the top 16 teams, a 4 seed or better in the NCAA tournament, more than likely too.
Yeah, obviously you've got to watch out for the tsunami that is South Carolina this year. But I mean, the home and home with there, it's always going to be tough. But I think, because I know we're going to get to this later in the podcast, I don't really know how I feel about this team this year. I think so. I think that the fact that you perhaps don't have the most difficult schedules, and then you look at the fact that the one of the Kentucky games will be in February. Auburn is always in February. Probably LSU will be in February. You've got, because LSU's not a home and home this year. So actually, I don't know if LSU will be, because obviously that school's that program's in disarray right now, to say the least. Probably Alabama. So I think there's a positive there, because you have an opportunity to kind of get your feet under you, in a sense, in the fact that you'll probably have some of those games like a Vandy, who I do think Vandy has a chance to be decent, because, they were actually, we look back, they were actually pretty good when they were healthy last year. South Carolina, not now, Missouri first-year coach, Mississippi State first-year coach. You're facing a lot of first-year coaches, and you have at least an established program in place. So you have an opportunity in the 18 game schedule to kind of pile up some early wins, and as the Alabamas and Arkansas and Kentuckys of the world are trying to go through their own navigation of the schedule. I haven't had a chance to look at their schedules, what issues they may have in terms of their scheduling, who they may play early on. You kind of got to have a chance to potentially kind of get out in front of some of these other schools, because in theory, your schedule's not going to be, I don't think it's difficult early on, because it's not the most difficult schedule this year. Like, I think last year there were a lot of early pitfalls, a lot of early things that were there. I didn't really respect Arkansas because of what I saw them do the year before. But I think that ship has sailed. Alabama kind of took a step back last year. We don't know what to expect from Kentucky. We just don't. So, what is this league going to be this year? I think that's something that I think could be talked about at a later date. What is this league going to be? Is this league going to be legitimately top 2, top 3? I know those things we talked about in years past. Last year, they're the best league or the second best league in the country. Although I think the Big Ten kind of reminded some people last year that they're actually a good league who just can't win a national championship. The only knock on them is they just can't win a national championship. But yeah, I think as you look at maybe, Auburn, Arkansas, Bama, Kentucky. Beyond that, are we sure that there's anybody that's going to be legitimately good this coming year? I mean, I'm obviously counting Tennessee in that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Past those five, like, are we sure that there's anybody that we
Yeah.
can just bank to be legitimately great? Like, mark them in for 22 to 25 wins. They're not sweating out Selection Sunday. They're there. They're looking at placement. LSU's not going. We assume, although they haven't. I know they haven't announced anything yet, but regardless of how good they are, not going to the tournament. Ole Miss, that coach was trying to get. He was trying to get to Florida. He was trying to get the Florida job last offseason. Didn't work out. Somebody else, or Georgia, I think it was.
Yeah.
Was trying to get the Georgia job, and he just was unfortunate that the Florida coach beat him to it. Florida goes and gets a guy, first year coach trying to build something. Georgia has a guy, first year trying to build something. In South Carolina's got a guy, first year trying to build something. And so, like, as you look at the layout of this league, I mean, there's going to be somebody. Like, I don't know who it's going to be, but there's going to be somebody that we aren't factoring in where all the pieces will fit. They'll connect, and we'll be talking about a team. Man, didn't see this. Who's going to be that team this year? Who was it last year? Got an A&M.
Yeah, they got hot.
I know they didn't make the tournament, but but yeah, like, I mean, I think I say all that to say, like, if you look at it from the scheduling perspective, until we know, there's no reason to think that Tennessee can't be walking into February 10-2 in the league. So at some point in February, they're 10-2 with 6 games to go. Because, here we are on June 29th, and a lot of these teams we don't know much about. And that could actually, as we'll talk about later, to me, that kind of includes Tennessee.
Yeah, and I think it's fair. And I think you made a good point, too, that I think, like you said, we'll talk about probably in future episodes about what the SEC is going to be this year, how good they can be, top heavy, are they going to be more even? I think a big X factor, kind of the biggest, the team that could probably throw the biggest wrench into all that's going to be Florida with, under the first year head coach, Todd Golden, who came from San Francisco, led them to their first NCAA tournament appearance since 1998 this past year. And they took Murray State to overtime, and that was a good Murray State team as well. They went 24-10 this past year, did San Fran. At the the WCC conference, West Coast Conference over there. So he'll be interesting because, again, I think almost any hire would have been an upgrade over Mike White to me. I'm not a huge Mike White fan. I'd be curious to see how he works out at Georgia. But that was just such a weird move. But you mentioned there's several first year head coaches at their schools, because technically Mike White is a first year head coach at Georgia, but he's not a first year head coach in the SEC. But again, Golden at Florida, Missouri's got a new head coach, Georgia has a new head coach. I mean, there's new blood in the SEC this year, where there hasn't been as much new blood in the conference the last few years. It's been a pretty steady conference for the most part over the last few years, and at Mississippi State, new head coach too. So yeah, that'll be interesting. I think that's a really good conversation to have here in the summer, where we're in July and kind of looking at the SEC and kind of maybe reviewing some of the rosters and stuff, or maybe some of the moves that happened this offseason, because there was a ton, not just coaching, but roster-wise, transfers and everything. Hopefully there's someone that there was an Arkansas reporter last year for Rivals who kept track of all of the goings and comings of transfers and stuff within the SEC and out of the SEC, and had an article he kept updating over and over. And hopefully he or somebody is doing something similar this year, because I would love to bookmark that and keep it up and kind of see, who all has and who else come in, who else left from the SEC, just from a transfer standpoint. Because again, Arkansas is bringing a ton of talent from the recruiting rankings as well, or recruiting, I guess, ranks, and some transfers too. So it's interesting. And you make a good point. I mean, aside from those 5, who do you think really can be a 20-win or more team? So that's a good conversation for the future. But I wanted to talk about the scheduling and kind of the opponents, at least in the Big 12 SEC Challenge, because we didn't get a chance to, or I guess kind of forgot last week. But yeah, I think you're right. I'm still not entirely sure what this Tennessee team is going to be, But the schedule, I think, is a lot more favorable to them this year than it was in years past, that it has been in years past. Because like you said, you had pitfalls early last year for Tennessee in November and then into December, and then even the early part of the SEC schedule, because Tennessee started out 2-3 in SEC play, maybe even 2-4. I forget which one it was now, but they lost to LSU, they lost to Kentucky, and they lost to, I don't remember the other team they lost to now, but at least those two teams, and they were pretty bad losses at that point too. And then Tennessee, went on the tear. Only loss they had for a long time was to Texas and then to Arkansas, and then finished the season out strong, and then won the SEC tournament. So yeah, I think this year you have a better chance of having a better start. Now, will the finish be what you had this past season? That's a really interesting question. We won't know all that until the schedule actually comes out. We get the dates for when Tennessee plays these teams, but I think you're right, Gene. I think, again, Tennessee and Kentucky will play probably twice in February. Maybe one of those would be in early March. Tennessee and Auburn will probably play in February, if not the last game in the regular season, because that tends to be when they play each other, it feels like. And then Tennessee and Bama will probably be, or Tennessee and Arkansas will probably be in February as well. Let's get into the questions here we have for the show. We have 3. Technically, we have 4. One of them, I will say it here. It's from Derek at the GymRat13 on Twitter, asking if Aiden Holloway commits, should he reclassify to this year to fill that guard need? Good question, Derek, but Aiden Holloway is going to go to Auburn unless something changes in the next month. He's committing sometime in July, I believe. We might revisit that if he ends up changing his mind or coming to Tennessee, Derek. But right now, I'm just gonna. It seems like all signs are pointing towards Auburn, so we may revisit that one here in a little bit, Derek. And maybe Gene and I were both wrong about Julian Phillips, so maybe we'll be wrong about, or I will be wrong about Aiden Holloway. But Gene, to get to actually kind of the first one here that I wanted to talk about was from Andrew Davis at Andrew D 2001 on Twitter. With the team seeming to go 10 deep this year, how do you think their rotation looks? He said this is a question for the men, by the way, because I asked for Vols or Lady of Vols questions. Gene, we've kind of hinted at this, danced around it, sort of talked about it multiple times on the show already. Let's just go ahead and answer it. So Andrew asked, let's go ahead and answer. What the heck does this rotation look like this year? Because we've talked about, who do you start and who plays when, who plays what. The roster is... I'm trying to see if there's an updated roster online from the actual University of Tennessee. I don't think it's been updated yet. But you still have that one spot available right now. Looks like it has been updated. So you have one spot available technically still where you can go add, and we've seen Tennessee pursue point guards and stuff and not work out. But as of right now, the roster as it stands for your scholarship players are, I'm doing this in jersey number order, which is how it is on the UT website. Jonas Adu, BJ Edwards, Julian Phillips, Tyreek Key, Zakai Ziegler, Olivier Camois, Jemai Meshach, Santiago Vescovi, Josiah-Jordan James, Urosh Plagic, and DJ Jefferson. And by the way, both Tyreek Key and Olivier Camois, according to John Rothstein, they both have been cleared for all basketball activities. So that's good news for Tennessee. Good news for those two guys who, both Tyreek Key missed all of last season due to shoulder surgery. And of course, Camois sustained that season-ending injury against South Carolina. Both those guys are cleared to go and have all basketball activities with Tennessee and with their teammates. But Gene, we've talked about kind of the backcourt being, even if Tennessee doesn't go and add another point guard or another guard here in the next month or so, it's still pretty loaded of a backcourt, because you have probably at this point Sakai and BJ Edwards being your point guards with the capabilities of a Josiah or a Vescovi playing point guard if needed. You have Tyreek Key and Vescovi at that 2 guard spot and then Jemai Meshach kind of at the 2 and 3. You have Josiah who can play the 3 and 4. You have Julian Phillips who can play the 3 and probably will play a 4 as well, but a different style of 4. Camois who plays the 4. Can play the 5 in the small ball, I think, too. And then you have Urosh and Jonas Adu as your main kind of 5s right there. And then again, you throw into what does DJ Jefferson do as a true freshman this year? I think as the roster stands right now, I think it's a team that is kind of 10 deep early, just kind of like we saw this past year, Gene. We saw the team play a lot more guys early on, and it paid dividends as the season went on, because you had Olivier Camois get hurt, and you had to play, Brandon Huntley Hatfield more. You had to end up playing Jonas Adu, even though you thought maybe you weren't going to have to. So it ended up paying dividends in the long run for Tennessee that they played guys early. But I think just kind of as a normal basketball season goes, I think you may see Tennessee go 10 deep in games earlier this season in November, December, maybe even in January. Once we get into February and March, I think you'll see that rotation whittled down to 8 and maybe even 7. Again, it depends on, do you trust that 8th guy, as you've said multiple times on the show, and kind of tried to raise the basketball IQ of me personally, and also the listeners. You don't always trust. You don't go 8 deep unless you have the 8th guy you trust, and as Tennessee have that 8th guy they trust this year, because I think to me they're starting 5 more or less. There's guys are gonna make the 5 guys getting the most minutes. I think this year for Tennessee will be Ziegler, Vescovy, James, Camwa, and then I would probably say Julian Phillips, but I think it'd be interesting to see how much run he gets early. Does he come on stronger as the season goes on? Because I think Urosh and Adu are going to definitely get a lot of minutes at that 5 spot. And then that leaves Tyreek Key. I think he's going to have an impact this year for Tennessee too. So then after that, who else do you have? Because I think those are kind of the guys, unless Meshack takes a significant step forward, I think it's BJ Edwards I think will have to play because you don't have another backup point guard either. So I think really looking at the main guys being left out potentially in the rotation right now are Meshack and Jefferson of the guys that you brought in. Of course, Toby Awaka isn't part of the roster yet, but he's likely to reclassify and bring in. But I think he's a redshirt candidate more than likely. But to me, that's the guys I see. And again, Meshack and Jefferson kind of the odd men out, in my opinion. Again, there's been workouts and stuff, but they haven't really started practicing or anything like that yet. But I think Key is going to make an impact. He could be the more or less your 6th man, I think, this year for Tennessee. Edwards is going to have to play unless he gets hurt or something. So you have to have minutes for him too. I think you have to play Adu because I think he's talented enough, especially defensively skilled enough, that you have to play him because I don't think he does a lot of things that Urosh can't do just from an athletic standpoint. But Urosh, again, played pretty well last year, all things considered, and has more than earned his minutes on this team. So, Gene, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it because I just think it's going to be 8 guys for sure. And then, do you need those more than those 8 once you get into kind of late February and into March, and hopefully for Tennessee's sake into April as well?
Question. I took a couple minutes to kind of type out just like just the guys. I didn't type in the kid who's not here yet because he's just not here yet. But I mean, here's what I could see. Penciled in Ziegler, Vescovy, James, and Adu. Those are the 4 names that I typed in kind of above the others. Because after that, that's where the problems come. Not problems, but just questions. You're going to go with the 5-star kid because he's got 5 stars. Phillips. I understand that there's kind of a rush from the fan base to kind of get this kid out here, especially when you see projections that have him lottery and, the whole being Cardi thing and all that stuff. I understand that there's a rush and a desire to get him 32 minutes a game. But what are you doing with Olivier, who before he got hurt was playing very well for this team last year? So one of those two is going to come off the bench unless you put Adu on the bench and their biggest guy is 6'8", which is possible. You can do that. You could go Ziegler, Vescovy, James, Phillips, and Kamwa, and just tell, Kamwa and Phillips to just battle like hell on the boards. And obviously Josiah can bring some of that as well. Then you look at, I typed in next to Key, I typed in 6'2" guard, I typed in shooting. I think that's kind of what he is at this level. I'm not talking about what he was at, Indiana State or wherever it was. I'm talking about what he's going to be at this level. I think a kid who can kind of provide, maybe think your hope is that he's a better version of Victor Bailey. A little more reliable, I guess you could say. It's probably the better way you would say it. Olivier, I just put a question, can he come off the bench? And if not him, same thing with Phillips. Can he come off the bench? B.J. Edwards, I said either guard slot, is he ready? Next to Urosh, I typed in the word goon, but then I also typed in they really improved his game last year. And it's indisputable. He went from just, number one cheerleader to a very reliable basketball player. Probably does a little too much, I don't want to say goonish activities, but there's a little too much of that. But, I mean, you kind of have to have that. We just saw in the NBA Finals some people rob off of that. Let's see Draymond Green. Next to DJ Jefferson, I just typed in, what is he? And I was watching, while you were talking, I was watching his highlight tape. And it's weird because the first thing that popped into my mind, and please don't take this the wrong way, fan base, I typed in better version of Devontae Gates. And maybe it's the left-handedness in him. But I see a kid who has a pretty smooth left-handed stroke, plays with a lot of energy. He's always clapping. He's always into it. I think he's the type of kid who would be perfectly okay if he's not a part of this rotation. Maybe he offensively maybe he is the offense what Meshack is to defense. Unfortunately, that means that they're both kind of left out because you have guys who bring that on both sides of the court. I mean, has Meshack improved offensively? Because that's kind of, you can throw that kid in for 5 minutes in the first half of the game, but down the stretch of games, unless you just need a foul, that kid's not going to get the minutes. Mm-hmm. Jefferson, is he ready? It's not a big question about him. Phillips, he's going to have to be ready. It's the same thing about Huntley Hatfield last year. You got to play that kid for future stuff. I got into a discussion / argument with a coaching friend of mine like Sunday, I think it was, over the weekend, about just where is Tennessee trending as a program. And we've talked about this on prior podcasts because I think it's fair to question. As Dan Levertard asked The Rock on the first episode of Ballers, what's the end game, Spence? Because you look and it's just, this was built off of the backs of the really good basketball players who were under-recruited coming out of high school. Now you're getting these guys, and Rick Barnes' calling card is development, but you're not keeping these kids long enough to be developed, so therefore they're going to their next level. And look, it's great for them. It's great for these kids. It's great for Kenny Challenge, great for Jaden Springer, great for Keon Johnson. But it's not doing an awful lot for the program. But when you get these guys, when you get a Julian Phillips, you have to give that kid opportunities to fail. Because he can succeed along the way. Mm-hmm. So you've got to find a way to get that kid 20 minutes a game. Mm-hmm. Because I just don't think that that's the type of kid that will be happy being a 5-10 minute per game guy. I just don't see it. I understand Huntley Hatfield got minutes and people have soured on him, and I think he's going to surprise some people this year at Louisville. I just do. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just think he is. I understand that Huntley Hatfield kind of got what he wanted in terms of just getting opportunities to play, and maybe didn't like his role. I'm not here to just solely listen to the talk from one side and not the other. Simply say, obviously it didn't work out, but those are the sorts of kids that have to get opportunities. And it's very rare that you get a kid who is a legitimate 5-star prospect who is perfectly okay coming in and saying 5 minutes per game, got it, coach. And look, that star ranking doesn't work out very well for everybody. See Imani Bates.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And, for those of you who don't know, the number one player in the country, I think, the next quote unquote, the next Kevin Durant, who at one point we laughed about because I think he put Tennessee on his short list one time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We talked about him around this time last year, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. ended up at Memphis, is now going to Eastern Michigan to play because nobody in the portal wanted it. Nobody. So we had to go back home. So now the number one player in the country is going to Eastern Michigan. It's why you don't. It's good to enjoy seeing all the stars by a kid's name when he commits to your program, but like there's a little bit of coddling that has to go along with it. But at the same time, I mean, like these kids have to be prepared for this moment. You got to find out if they're ready. You can tell quite early if you watch any Memphis basketball last year that Amani was not ready for all of that stuff. He reclassifies a 17-year-old kid. He's just now 18. You know, I mean, Huntley Hatfield. You know, some of these kids in like the Bobby Mays programs, Bobby does a great job of like getting these kids exposure and stuff. They get to college and it's, you know, even, you know, being a role player at the University of Tennessee is not as glamorous as being a star player for Bobby Mays, and you're not ready for it. But you got to get those kids out there to see if they're ready, because some will thrive. So again, you can't have Julian sitting over there playing, you know, looking like a star against Radford or whoever they may play in the early season schedule and getting a taste of it, and then all of a sudden you're playing some of these legitimate teams, the Gonzagas of the world, and you're not playing. You're playing them 5 minutes. Like you got to get that kid out there because that is a part of it. And when these kids are going to stay for 1 year, they don't really care about your resume of developing players. Are you going to give me the platform to get to the next level? If the answer is no, then I got to leave. I got to go to the place where I will get the platform, where I will get it. So it'll be interesting to see. Like that's going to be, I think, the biggest thing. You've got, I think, I think I count 6 potential starters. I think Urosh would be perfectly okay with whatever role. I think that kid just loves University of Tennessee and loves playing, loves being around that fan base, loves being around that team. He'll be now can't not play him at all, but I think he'll be perfectly okay in a role that he plays like 10 to 15 minutes a game. But between Ziegler, Vescovy, Phillips, James, Adu, and Olivier, 5 of those guys, one of those 6 is coming off the bench.
Yeah.
Probably not going to be Ziegler, but it could be. How does that work? I mean, we've seen the Vescovy experiment at point guard. I'm sorry. In my opinion, it's never worked out that great. It's been okay. But we saw what happened. We saw what happened last year when Tennessee had a real legitimate point guard.
Yep.
And not just some, you know, ball handlers that can do it. It's looked really good last year. Everybody loved, you know, the taste of being, you know, like getting to argue about should we have been a 2 seed? How are we a 3? Maybe we should have been a 1. You were legitimately a top 10, top 15 program in the country last year when it was all said and done. So I think Ziegler starts, Vescovy and James, book it.
Yep.
Phillips, Adu, and Olivier. That's where it is. But out of that, you know, then can you manage the egos, the person who doesn't start there? Adu doesn't have an ego, I don't think. Olivier and Julian, that's where it gets in. But if I have no doubt that, you know, Rick can figure that thing out, then Tyreek Key. I mean, like, that's a kid who played a lot in college. He'd be okay playing 10, 15 minutes. Like BJ Edwards. That's another thing. That's now up to 8 people. I think like you, I think DJ Jefferson is probably odd man out. Meshack, I had him on a different line to begin with. And you've got Euros. So I think what you're looking at is a team that has a lot of potential, but you also have this weird thing where you've got a sophomore kid who's taking over at starting point guard. You've got 2 seniors that are kind of this, you know, the leaders of your program. You've got a senior that's probably coming off the bench who just transferred in. You've got to deal with the whole Olivier and Julian thing. And look, I don't want to act like there's bad blood. I'm not suggesting that at all. So please don't think I'm saying.
Right.
I'm just simply saying That's tough. That's tough for the 5-star kid. That's also tough for the 4-year kid.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you've got to find a happy medium there. And so that's why I think it's going to be interesting to see just kind of how all this stuff transpires this year, because that's going to be one of the keys is how good this team ends up being.
Yeah, I don't envy the positions either. Well, it's good. It's a good problem to have that both Rick Barnes and Kelly Harper, to be honest, have in terms of trying to figure out the more Kelly Harper, especially with her loaded roster she has. It's not a bad problem to have, but I don't envy the I guess the decisions that either coach has to make, and like you said, that kind of managing the egos. And Rick Barnes has been doing this for decades. I think he has the experience managing egos and doing things. Has he done everything perfectly in his 30 plus years of coaching? No, but no one's done anything perfectly in 30 plus years of living and doing your job. So I trust him for the most part to do everything well. Again, perfectly, no, but I trust him to do everything well because he's done it before. He's proved at Tennessee he's done it before for the most part too. Again, I guess you could argue with Brandon Huntley Hatfield, did he? But that's a different situation. I don't think this would be a similar situation. Do you want to say something, Gene?
But today, but sometimes when I just start thinking, I just go well off the grid and I just think about stuff. My question is, what's about to happen to this program when Vescovy and Josiah leave?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Like to me, that's the most interesting thing out there because, again, it goes back to what so much has been built on all these experienced guys who are your program builders that are there. But how many of these guys maybe, how many of these guys is there another Josiah in this program who, like Vescovy, I guess you can add Vescovy. He came in midway through the year. But how many guys like that are on this roster right now? Is it BJ Edwards? Will BJ play enough his first year for people to kind of latch on to him? Because I think the kids who you for sure know are going to play early on, Phillips won't be here long enough to be really, grabbed onto, and so I think one thing that one of these days, maybe it's this time next year, unless those two decide to take the COVID year and come back for an additional season, which I doubt is going to happen.
Yeah, I doubt it too.
Like what happens with this program going forward? Because so much of the success and the reason why they're getting all these guys right now is because of that team that team's now 3 years old. It's been 3 years since that magical run to number one in the country. Heck, Brent Williams is about to get contract number 2. And Admiral and Bone are still trying to get to latch on. I think I saw Bone is getting a chance for the Celtics this summer.
Yep.
I'm assuming Admiral is in Orlando still. Hopefully he's not fighting because he's fighting for a spot to begin with. It's unfortunate because he's at one of the 2 worst organizations in the NBA. OKC, just in terms of recent success with OKC being the other. And with no real, answers up there.
No, I feel bad for any Magic fans out there.
I know one.
You and I only know one, Gene.
Yeah, I know one. I know one. And heck, they're in a better situation. One of those 2 teams has to click with Banchero or Holmgren. You certainly hope so, but problem is you've got teams that are 1,000% tanking. Spurs are tanking, but they've gotten pop. So, anyways, like I just look and I see when you look at this roster and you look at who teams are going after. I think Urosh has gone after this year too, although Urosh seems like the type to take the COVID season.
Yeah, I would say I think he might take the COVID season. Yeah.
Yeah, but even then, you're just talking about a kid who averages 4 points, 5, 6 rebounds a game or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You're not latching on to that guy.
Right.
Like John Fulkerson kind of was that guy, but the kid also averaged a double-double for a month. So he was a little more than just the lovable kid who dove in the stands for loose balls and had the shaggy hair. He was actually a really good basketball player. I don't know what exists after those two kids leave, because I don't know what maybe that's the opportunity for, dare I say, Barnes to sneak out the door.
I think it's a case too of I hadn't really thought about that until you brought it up. But I think it's a case of maybe me, telling people to really enjoy this upcoming season, because the next year is going to be. I don't think it'll be the same way it was after Grant and Admiral, all those guys left, where it was a 17 and 14 year, the year that ended short because of COVID. I don't think it'll be quite like that, but you make a good point. I mean, you're losing Vescovy, you're losing James, you're going to lose one way or the other, probably Julian Phillips. I mean, maybe Camwell also, because this will be his fourth year. I mean, he could stick around for a fifth, but I don't know that he will or not. This will be, assuming he's healthy and doesn't have a sophomore slump this upcoming season. I mean, I think the next year's team, Gene's probably Sakai Ziegler's team, but then I think it's kind of like you said, the attachment. The fans love Sakai Ziegler. There's no question about that. But you look at that season after Grant, Admiral, Kyle, and Bone all left. It was, you had Josiah come in as a freshman. Then you had Bowden and Turner. Yeah, Bowden and Turner were your two guys that fans loved. And I think in this case it'll be Ziegler, and assuming he comes back for a fifth year, which I think he will, it'll be Ziegler and Urosh. And then a couple. I mean, Meshack will probably not have played enough. Like you said, BJ Edwards, I don't know that he'll have played enough to really, fans to grab onto him. Key's going to be gone. I don't think DJ Jefferson. I don't know that Adu will have done enough to really grab onto fans. I mean, they'll know who these guys are, but I don't know. Like you said, they won't be the fan favorites, the faces of the team, like Josiah and Vescovy are this year. Again, I think Ziegler will, because fans love Ziegler, but he's the main one. And after that, that's a good point.
And I think a big part of it is, like, these guys have to, like, what really helped, what really has helped the entirety, the majority of Barnes' time, is that he got Admiral when he first got there.
Mm-hmm.
And when the team started getting good, as Admiral was there, as Grant was here, but Fulkerson was in there too. So Admiral and Grant leave, and you had Lamonte, you had the unfortunate retirement, you had Bowden out there still fighting, and you had Fulkerson. And then here comes Josiah and Vescovy. So now you have all three, where which gives you opportunity to bring in Keon and Jaden and guys like that, but you kind of knew that they were short timers. And then this year you get Kenny Chandler, but you still got Fulkerson out there. And Thompson Bolin was louder for, I don't know if Kennedy had one of those like 30-point explosions, but nothing was as loud as the N1 that Fulkerson had against Arizona. That arena was never as loud all season long. And look, Tennessee gave that fan base a lot to be excited about. Aren't they entering this season on like some 20-something game home win streak or something?
Close. I'm assuming. Yeah, they were undefeated last year. It's close to 20 games, if not 20. Yeah.
So, like, a big part of it, something I've had to learn as I've learned fandom, in adulthood, is that you kind of have to have that thing to latch on to. And I just think that you've got Ziegler, and that's nice and that's cool, and he gives you a guy. He kind of gives you a chance to do it, but who else do you have?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's because everybody else is young after that. I mean, Urosh, but, like Urosh, will he be the starter? Like, can you get really excited about a kid who gives you 16 minutes a game off the bench? Like, will it be the sort of emotions that existed when Admiral went through his senior day, which I was at? I saw Fulkerson's on television. I I saw Bowden's and even Lamonte's. They were that year, as well as the guy I think we're about to talk about, Lucas Campbell. I think theirs were all together. And so, yeah, like, I just think it's interesting because I believe, I don't know if I've said it before, but I've thought it in, look, man, like it or not, if they don't get some more of these, like, if they continue to bring in these 5-star guys who stay for a year, maybe 2 years, stay for a year and go pro, stay for a year and transfer, stay 2 years and transfer, whatever the case may be, guess what you've become? Exactly.
Yep.
You don't have an establishment. And you got to enjoy being the anti-Kentucky for years. You're number one in the country based off of all these guys who were the 3-4 year guys. And now you're transitioning into that. And look, the portal is great. The portal will undoubtedly bring in some great additions. One of those kids, I guess, only brought in Key this year. But one of these guys will eventually click and have one of those amazing years. And I think Key will be somebody that fans like and enjoy. He's a Tennessee kid. He'll be fun to watch when he gets his time. But that's why I've always asked, what's the long-term plan for Tennessee? If it's to be Kentucky, you got to be a better version of Kentucky. And I've seen some of Kentucky's recruiting. That guy got smart. I've seen one of their 2023 signees. His last name is Shepard. And yeah, Jeff Shepard's his dad. I saw that kid in Gatlinburg. There's another kid who I think has scored like 3,000 points in Kentucky, who I think just got a Kentucky off. Calipari's out here mixing in some of these kids who are going to hang around for a few years. Like, at some point, Tennessee's going to have to probably do the same thing because I just don't know how sustainable it is to keep just bringing in portal guys and 5-star guys. I think it's all going to just result in success because most of the teams that are having success right now in college basketball, in all sports, I mean, at the NBA, in college, they have a nice base of guys who are in the program, and they add in guys. Like, the Warriors brought in a couple guys. Like, the Celtics' biggest acquisition, this better than I am, is Al Horford.
Yep.
Who's 40. So you're, it starts at the bottom. And I always think teams should be started at the bottom and not literally just broad, piece in, piece here. Okay, you're gone in 8 months. All right, we'll see you. You got to have some guys to kind of maintain what this program is.
Yeah.
Got that this year. Ziegler will probably carry it on. But do you have enough guys around him to kind of keep this thing going?
Yeah, and I think they've tried to do that, and I think you have it with multi-year guys like B.J. Edwards, Jemai Meshack, Jonas Adu. Like those guys are multi-year guys, and probably DJ Jefferson too. But also to your point, we've talked about this on the show before too. It's become harder to even do that now because of the transfer portal. Because if a guy isn't playing after a year, maybe 2, he's going to leave more than likely. So you can try, and I think they have more or less tried to do that. Like you said, not just bring in the 5 stars and the transfers, but to actually bring in multi-year guys. And I think for the most part, they've done a decent job at it. They could have done better. And there's also been misses along with the guys who have also transferred out due to playing time. So Tennessee's still in a good spot. Like, this isn't, you are any the one who's saying that they're doomed or anything like that, but it's just you make a good point. Like, you can't just, you're not going to be able to just do it year in, year out like a Kentucky had been for a while. And then we saw what's happened with them, where they haven't had the success with that one and done model. And then now with the transfer portal, it's interesting to see what Arkansas has done with the transfers and what they've been able to do with that. And again, this year they'll be relying on a lot of probably one and done type talent or two and done type talent this year, and not as many transfers, but still some transfers in too, and kind of seeing what they do with that. So that kind of folds in here. We have 2 more questions. That kind of folds into the next one I wanted to talk about. We spent a lot of time with Andrew's question and kind of also got off on our own tangent, but talk about these next 2 kind of a little quicker, because we've already talked for like 50 minutes or so here. This one's from KBS at KBS51 on Twitter. What are realistic expectations for the team at SEC competition? How does Tennessee's returning production compare with other SEC teams? We kind of talked about this again at the beginning of the episode when we looked at the conference opponents and stuff, Gene. But without really getting too deep into it, because I've had a chance to look at all the rosters again and see kind of all the turnover and who all's been brought in and who all's left. But I think just returning production kind of experience, I think Tennessee's probably on the higher end of the returning experience, because you got to think, I mean, look at who all you lost. You didn't lose, I mean, obviously Kennedy Chandler and John Forrest. I'm talking about from the transfer portal and stuff. Tennessee lost this past year. You lost your leading scorer in Kennedy Chandler, and you lost, a guy who'd been here for a million years in Fulkerson, but you return your second leading scorer, your third leading scorer, and your fourth leading scorer. So you return three of your top four leading scorers, and then you return a guy in Camwa who would have been your fifth leading scorer, except he got hurt. And of course, he still finished the year with more points per game than Fulkerson, but Fulkerson ended up playing more games. So I would say he kind of counts as the fifth guy there. But Camwa technically would have been the fifth leading scorer on last year's team when it was all said and done. So really, you're returning four of your top five guys from last season. In terms of scoring and also just kind of other production-wise and rebounding and assists and stuff too. And then you're bringing in, again, a Tyreek Key who's been in college basketball for several years already, a guy, Orosh Patrick, who's been in your program for several years already. Adu is a year older as a sophomore. So I again, without looking too deep into the other teams, Tennessee is going to be one of the more experienced teams returning, and they return a lot of production. You lose a huge piece in Kennedy Chandler, but you got to like the other guys you're returning. You didn't lose any other of your starters, or I guess, yeah, you didn't really lose any of your starters from last year. Brandon Huntley Hatfield started 13 games, but I wouldn't call him a full-time starter. Your full-time starters were Chandler, Vescovy, James, Camwa when he was healthy, and then Urosh and Fulkerson kind of split starting duties for the most part there and then again, Huntley Hatfield too, but you lose Fulkerson and Kennedy as your kind of starting pieces there / sixth guy, and then you return your other starters, and your main bench guys are Adu that came back from last year, and then Meshack will be, again, interesting to see what he does. But I think, again, this will be a fairly experienced team. To answer the other question, as far as the question that KBS asked, what are realistic expectations? Without kind of rehashing too much what we said at the beginning of the show, Gene, I think it's going to depend a lot on kind of what the SEC is like this year, because there's just a lot of question marks with the SEC. I think it'll be an entertaining conference. I don't know that it'll be a top 2, top 3 conference like it was last year. I think it'll be top 5 just because, I mean, they're a Power 6 conference, so I don't expect them to be at the bottom of that totem pole. But I expect them to be kind of a top 5, top 4 type of conference this upcoming season. I think Tennessee, realistic expectations are for them to be in the top 4 still. I mean, I think that they have the experienced roster, they have the talent on that roster still to be a top 4 team in the SEC. I don't know that I've seen some early projections already, very early projections, kind of have them already be kind of the favorite in the SEC. I think you're going to see a lot of Tennessee, a lot of Kentucky, and a lot of fans being wild on Arkansas because of who all they're bringing in as kind of the 3 teams that people are going to circle. And you can't write out Auburn. Auburn just, they won the SEC regular season this past year. So you can't count them out either. So I think those would be the 4 teams that most media people are going to circle, are kind of the 4 teams that have been atop of the SEC the last few years, for the most part, give or take a year or two where, one of those teams or 2 of those teams have been down. It's really been those 4 teams at LSU and again, Alabama recently too, that has been kind of the upper echelon of the SEC for the last 5 years or so. So I think realistic expectations for Tennessee is, again, top 4. And I think Tennessee is probably one of the most experienced teams returning in the SEC next year. Again, without kind of doing too much research into it yet, I just look at who Tennessee's returning, and I don't know that too many other teams in the SEC or in the country, for that matter, are returning, 4 of their top 5 scorers from the previous season.
I think Tennessee will easily be top 4. I think we just kind of booked that. I mean, maybe sleeper would be probably A&M. Kind of sneaking to, I think 1 through 5 are kind of pretty interchangeable. Alabama, Auburn, Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee. I think it's interesting because I was kind of trying to do some stuff off memory Bama added Brandon Miller and Jaden Bradley.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Quinton Lee's back. I think he's coming off like an injury or something. Had a couple transfers come in. Auburn obviously lost number 3 pick in the draft, and then also Walker Kessler. I saw the Morehead State kid play that they brought in. I think it's Donnie Broom. I think is his name. Really, really talented player. It's like 6'10", 6'11". He's kind of maybe a mix of those two guys, Kessler or Smith, but he's not as good as either one. Can't block like Kessler, can't score like Smith, but good player. And then they got the 2 guards, Johnson and Green. Arkansas, we already know about. Nick Smith, all the pieces they brought back. Kentucky's going to be tough. And, they bring back the National Player of the Year. Got 2 5-star guards, and Wallace and Livingston. CJ Frederick can shoot the daylight side of the ball. Our transfer. Got a kid from Illinois State that can score as well. So I could see Tennessee factoring in somewhere in that mix. I don't see them going to 5. I think somewhere 1 through 4, which I guess would mean a double bye in the SEC tournament. It's more realistic. As long as they don't suffer. Look, I think they can handle a guard injury, but you don't want Ziegler or Vescovy or Edwards specifically, just because Vescovy and Phillips can kind of play multiple positions. Definitely don't want Josiah to go out. I think you just can't lose him. Not on this team. So certainly got some pieces in place there. But I could, like I said, I see them being anywhere in the 1 through 5 thing. I think the schedule will give them some opportunities to maybe sneak out to an advantage early on, and then you just have to have a good February to balance that out. You're going to get, SEC does a good job of scheduling. You're going to get Alabama once in February. You're going to get Auburn once in February. You're going to get Arkansas once in February. You're going to get Kentucky once in February. And you could easily get, I don't remember the teams that you get twice, but you could easily get Kentucky twice. Because I'm pretty sure my first year covering Tennessee, they played twice in 3 weeks. I think they played in Lexington sometime around Valentine's Day, and then played in Knoxville towards the end of the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
That was the 18-19 team.
Yep. So that's usually almost how it feels like they played twice, and it's usually within a 3.5 week span when they do it.
Yeah. So I can see that. I think they'll be somewhere in 1 through 5. There's a lot of teams who are going to be trying to figure a lot of stuff out. It's just how many teams go into the season with more answers than questions. And I think that the 5 teams I've mentioned have more answers than they do questions, which is why I kind of put them on a level above the rest.
I will say it's interesting to look at kind of the transfer rankings, because that kind of goes into experience, because you're bringing in 5-star recruits, that's not experience, and you don't know what exactly the production is going to be like in college. And it's also fair to say, you don't know what the production is going to be like from a transfer from one school to the next either. But the SEC has some of the top transfer schools in the country in terms of looking at just 247's transfer rankings. There's, I think, 3 SEC teams in the top 10, but you're the top 4 SEC teams in terms of the transfer portal on 247 is Arkansas, which, they've just brought in a lot of talent. Missouri, which I thought was interesting. Florida and LSU, because LSU is more because they had to. And I guess kind of Missouri, too, is both those teams had 6 transfers they brought in. But Arkansas and Florida kind of have the more talented type of transfers, it looks like. I think LSU got some good guys, too. Arkansas bringing in Jackson Robinson they left. You're right, he left to go to other places. But they brought in Ricky Council IV from, what's that? I can't remember where he came from now. But he came in. They also brought in Mekhi Mitchell and Mikael Mitchell, the Mitchell brothers, from Rhode Island. Got in Javon Brazil, who played for Missouri as a forward, so he transferred within the conference. And then from Arizona State, Jalen Graham as well. So several, again, the Mitchell brothers, Brazil, Graham, and then also brought in Ricky Council IV as your transfers. You also look over at who's this, Missouri, which I'll look at Missouri, but I don't know that it's a huge thing. Isaiah Mosley is one of the guys who transferred over the Tigers. I'm just interested to see kind of experience-wise who all came in here. He transferred over to Missouri. You also have Trey Gomelian. I don't even know how to say that name. Demol Hodge, who both came from the same school, which I don't know what school that is. What school is this? Cleveland State is where they came from. And by the way, the other kid, Isaiah Mosley, was transferring in from Missouri State. And then you also had them bringing in Noah Carter, who came from UNI, so Northern Illinois. And then a player from Clemson, and Nick Honor. And then they also brought in DeAndre Golson from Wisconsin-Milwaukee, so the UW-Milwaukee, Bruce Pearl's old stomping grounds over there. Florida and LSU are kind of the ones that also I think will be Vol fans more interested in as well, especially Florida because they're, to me, a big X factor. The most recent one for them was back in May was Kyle Lofton, who transferred from St. Bonaventure, he was a very good player for the Bonnies. Of course, people got to see them in the NCAA tournament. He was very good for them. You also brought in Trey Bonham from VMI, who, you know that name, Gene. Alex Fudge from LSU, and then you also had Belmont transfer Will Richard, who's going to Florida. Who, again, he's a very good player, combo guard from Belmont. So, they got Belmont, LSU. And then again, VMI and whoever else I said, Kyle Lofton from Bonaventure. I think Florida got some really good, talented players in his transfers. And then again, LSU more or less because they had to, because they at one point didn't even have a roster. They literally had no one on the team. Derek Fountain from Mississippi State transferred in to LSU. You also had Trey Hannibal, who came from Murray State, which again. New head coach from Murray State brought in a lot of his guys from Murray State. He had Trey Hannibal, KJ Williams, and Justice Hill, all from Murray State, going to LSU. And some of those guys, especially Hill, a very good player over there. KJ Williams also very good for Murray State. Cam Hayes from NC State, who Tennessee once recruited out of high school, transferred in. And then also Kendall Coleman, who played for Northwestern State. So that was a lot of stuff I just kind of threw everybody there. I was just curious to kind of look at some of the transfers that had come in to the SEC and some of the top programs according to 247 in the transfer portal for the SEC. To get to the final question though, Gene, as we want to wrap up the show here, is from Brian Walker, which is at Brian Walker with the Y and Brian, and then his at is at Brian Walker without a E in the Walker. It says, tell us more about the new recruiting coordinator for basketball. Gene, it's a name that'll probably sound familiar to a lot of Vol fans listening. Tennessee's new recruiting coordinator for men's basketball is a former Tennessee player. No, it wasn't a scholarship player. A former walk-on, Lucas Gamble, who I think you just mentioned a few minutes ago, Gene, saying you got to see his senior day because he's with a lot of the big-name guys for Tennessee in their senior day. But Lucas Gamble is now the Tennessee director of recruiting. It was originally reported by the Knox News Sentinel, or I guess Knox News, Mike Wilson. I also see the RTI also confirmed it with a Tennessee spokesperson on, I think, late Tuesday, maybe even Wednesday, Tuesday when this was announced. So he's going to be, again, the director of recruiting. He'll oversee on-campus visits for recruits as well as recruiting travel for the Vols coaching staff. Of course, he played for Tennessee as a walk-on, and in the coaching ranks, though, he actually just spent this last season with ETSU as the director of basketball operations for ETSU under, of course, former Tennessee assistant Des Oliver, who is the head coach at ETSU. I didn't know this, but in the RTI article here, says the Christ Academy of Knoxville standout. He came to Tennessee as a member of the track and field team before transitioning to basketball as a walk-on in 2015. He played in 16 games at Tennessee, scored 15 points during his 4 seasons, and of course, was part of the 2018 SEC championship team and the 2019 Sweet 16 team as well. So, Gene, I don't think it's the director of recruiting it's a nice ring to it. You think, oh, that's a really cool title. It doesn't have maybe as much of prestige as maybe you might think it does, but it's still an important role. You oversee all the visits and again with the travel and stuff too. So it's not like I'm saying it's just a token hire or whatever. It's an important role. But I think it's nice to see that a guy who was at Tennessee already at one point for 4 years at Tennessee goes and follows an assistant coach to ETSU and then comes back to Tennessee. So I don't know, I don't think it's going to massively change anything about Tennessee's recruiting or, change the way I just realized my camera has been messed up this entire time. My apologies, guys. Change the way that Tennessee has been, way they do recruiting or anything like that. But that's a nice hire. It's not a big splashy name. Again, I don't think a director of recruiting is going to be a big splashy name. I'll kind of look back and see who some of the other directors of recruiting have been for Tennessee. But Lucas Campbell, the new director of recruiting, I think it's, I don't think it's a bad move. It's a guy who knows Rick Barnes, that's for sure. He came to Tennessee right as Rick Barnes did in 2015. That was when Barnes was hired as the head coach. That was right. 15-16 would have been his first year. So he had been part of the Tennessee ever since Rick Barnes was there. Left, of course, to go follow Des Oliver at ETSU, and now he's back at Tennessee. So that's a good hire. I mean, don't want to make it sound like it's the world's best hire or that's a terrible hire. I just think it's just a little bit of background on who Lucas Campbell is for those who may not know.
Yeah, I'll only add this. I mean, I'm pretty sure after kind of reading what's required of this position, it's essentially the same position that he had at ETSU. It's just Tennessee has a lot more money than ETSU. And so therefore they have a director of basketball operations. And like at ETSU, the director of basketball operations also handles all that recruiting stuff. It's just Tennessee now has obviously the queen of Tennessee basketball. I'm sorry, Mary Carter Eggert. She handles all the director of basketball operations stuff, whereas Lucas's sole job would be to coordinate these recruiting visits, which is really cool. Because like I said, that's the same at mid-major Division I schools, especially like in ETSU or UTC. That person is the same person that handles, the visits, the scheduling. Heck, the assistant coaches help out a lot with those visits and stuff. And so it's really cool that Lucas, who, was around Barnes, a lot. I mean, spent 7 years essentially with him, and then spent last season with Dez. Like, that's just a Tennessee guy. And so now you have an opportunity has presented itself to be a part of this staff that he obviously has familiarity with, especially at the top. And I have no doubt that he'll take full advantage of it because, I mean, he parlayed this into, and real quick, I think it looks like a new position. I'm looking at last year's roster.
Yeah, I'm all the way back to the 1920 season, and I have yet to see a director of recruiting. So I think you're right. I think it is just a new position.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a position that's typically held. Director of basketball operations kind of coordinates a lot of that stuff.
Yep.
Maybe that was something that I'm trying to read real quick about what some of these responsibilities were. Kim McDonald, I looked at, he was the director of student athlete development. It's not there. I'm glancing. I doubt that they've adjusted. I doubt they may have just. I think that they just took that out.
But it could just be something that he's taking off the plate of, as you mentioned, Mary Carter Eggert, because she's been there 8 years and she's done. I mean, she's kind of the untalked about heart and soul of that kind of coaching staff over there.
Yeah, so it's just, and obviously it's a great opportunity for Lucas, which I think is the biggest thing. And I doubt that this is costing, if it is truly Mary Carter that maybe just had something taken off her plate, I doubt that actually affects the paycheck or anything like that. I think that it just gives her more time to focus on other things, which is all the stuff that she deals with day-to-day operations, travel, all of that stuff. It says right here, she also manages head coach Rick Barnes' calendar.
Yeah.
And she literally her job is to control Rick Barnes and the Tennessee coaching staff. So if she can take recruiting off her plate, then that's certainly not a loss. It certainly is a win for Lucas in this case. Yeah,
and by the way, I'm looking at her bio on the YouTube website, and thought this is a cool quote from Josiah-Jordan James. It said, MC is really the mastermind behind it all. She's our coach off the court. She plays a big role in all of the players' lives by checking on us daily, making sure we have everything we need, and she always keeps our spirits up. She brightens every room she's in, and Tennessee basketball wouldn't be as great as it is without her. I mean, I remember Mary Carter because I, covered the team for multiple years in actual media. I mean, she's been in some sort of administrative role with Tennessee since 2007. She was a student assistant for the media relations department from 07 to 11. 11 to 12, she was a graduate assistant for media relations, which would have been when I knew her, was when she was with media relations, and then also as the assistant media relations director from 12 to 15, and then from 15 to now, she's been the director of basketball ops. So I knew her when she was with media relations, and I've known her, a little bit more since then too, but I haven't, talked to her in a long time. Maybe she'd be an interesting person to have as a guest on the show. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's just kind of a title given to somebody, and I think he's taking some stuff off her plate, or maybe some stuff off of somebody else's plate that, just bringing Lucas Campbell in because you had some, more off-season changes with support staff roles and stuff with, again, the promotion to, oh goodness, I just forgot his name. But you had a little bit, not as much the previous year, but you had some more, movement with your assistant coaches and stuff. So just kind of a, maybe reshuffling of responsibilities, but it's nice to have Lucas Campbell, back in the fold and back at Tennessee, where he spent a large chunk of his, pretty developmental life as a college student at Tennessee. So nice to see he's back at the University of Tennessee. Gene, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to everyone sending questions, to Andrew Davis, to K-Bess, to Brian Walker, even to Derek, who I know we didn't really answer your question, but you asked about Aiden Holloway, so do appreciate you sending your question. And feel free to send some in the future. I think you've asked ones in the past for mailbag episodes, so thank you so much for that. All of you guys who are sending questions. Maybe we'll have to do a Lady Vol episode one in the future, whether it's you, me, Gene, or if I bring on someone like Maria to do it. But I think it'd be nice to have a mailbag episode for the Lady Vols too. But thank you again, Andrew, K-Bess, Brian, and Derek, for all your questions. If you guys have any more questions in the future, leave any on the comments on below on this YouTube video. Reach us on Twitter at VolHoopsFever on Twitter, or reach me. I'm at Mr._Rutherford on Twitter as well. But thank you all again for listening, for tuning in, however you're doing it, watching it, listening to it on the podcast. I really appreciate all of you guys every single week listening and watching along to our show. Signing off for Gene, I'm Nathanael, and this has been another episode of Vol Basketball Fever. Thank you for watching Vol Basketball Fever. Give this video a like and subscribe to the channel while you're here. We appreciate all your support, and the show wouldn't be possible without Vol fans like you. Thank you.